Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you very much, all of you, for inviting us to share some of our experiences on the work we undertake on basically small-scale dairy farming as a rural development option. Mexico is a country of contrast. We have one of the richest men in the world, and about 50% of the population live under the poverty indices set by the Mexican government. So it's a huge contrast, and there's a huge contrast between the urban and the rural populations. Mexico City is, if not the first, the second largest city in the world, the largest metropolis with, it depends on where you set the boundary, from 20 to 23 million people living in a valley, and not far from Mexico City that can be as sophisticated or as poor as many other cities in the world. You have rural livelihoods that again is a range of possibilities. And we're going to talk about milk, which is always a very interesting commodity, a very interesting food. Why, I'll tell you why I work with it. Just to find where we are in terms of Mexico, I just got this data from Index Mundi on dairy production in the world. The largest producer of milk in the world is India, followed by the European Union, then the United States, and Mexico is the 8th largest with just about 12 million metric tons per year. Which, by the way, is what Wisconsin produces every year. And but this is milk from all species. And when we talk about world cow milk, India comes third because most of the milk in India is from buffalo, and the European Union would be the largest milk production. This is 27 countries. Croatia was still not accounted for as the new EU 28. And United States, and again Mexico with, in terms of cow's milk, just under 12 million, followed very closely by Argentina. So Mexico would be the second largest producer of milk in Latin America. Mexico has a population of 117 million people. And how has milk been growing over the past 15 years? Is growing at about 1.4% per year, which is above population growth. Population growth in Mexico has been diminishing over the years, and right now it's just about 0.9. So milk production has been growing steadily at a rate higher than the population growth. This is the country. I took this from a work by Michelle, the bird's eye view of the Mexican dairy industry. This is the United States, this is Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. We're border states. The largest milk producer state in Mexico is Jalisco on the west, a very strong cattle producing tradition from very early after the Spaniards brought the cattle. The second and third are Coahuila and Durango. Here you have a region called La Laguna, which is where it's Cow City. It's a place where large dairies are placed. Chihuahua fourth. This is Veracruz on the Gulf Coast, a large state. This is Guanajuato, and this number 7 is the state of Mexico. It's a small state. The whole extension of the country is about 2 million square kilometers. You work your square miles because I didn't do my homework. But the state of Mexico is just about 1%. It's 24,000 square kilometers. It's the most urbanized state in the country. In the country, it's about 30% of the population live in rural areas, about 70% in what are called urban cities, although they are called urban just when they have 5,000 people and above. And if anybody of you have traveled around Mexico, you can have villages of 40,000 people that are called cities. But it's small, it's very urbanized state, is the most industrialized state, and still is number 7, producing just over 1 million tons of milk pounds per year. There are 3 main dairy producing systems in Mexico. One is the large scale, I call them industrial. These are milk factories more than milk farms with large herds, par with any of the large intensive following the California style of farming, year-round confinement, total mixed rations, high inputs in terms of investment, technology, like rotary milking parlors, huge cow sheds, and highly mechanized to do all the cropping and the feeding of the cows with specialized dairy breeds, mostly Holstein. It has happened all over the world. We've painted the cows all black and white. We can discuss if that's right. And there's some other beautiful cows like this Jersey herd in Querétaro. But you can see the size of the wheelbarrow they used to bring the feed in for the cows. And you have very large cows. And for many people, they think that Mexican dairy farming is this. But there are other systems. Back to the map. Just from southern Tamaulipas, all of the Gulf Coast to the Caribbean, and all of the Pacific coast, all the lowlands till southern Sinaloa, now that everybody knows where Sinaloa is after Sean Penn interviewed El Chapo. It's tropical and subtropical, high temperatures, always above 18 degrees, and we have this mixed systems, dual purpose systems of cows of Cebu breeding crossed with specialized European like Holstein or Brown Swiss. The cross with the Zebu. The Zebus are resistant to heat, are tolerant to heat, and resistant to tropical diseases, mainly tick-borne diseases as anaplasmosis and babesiosis. And in the subtropics, it's all this. Most of Mexico is subhumid. That means we have a very well-defined rainy season and a very well-defined dry season. Depending on where in the country, it usually rains for 5 to 6 months. In some places less, like in the north, which is semi-arid, and the rest of the year you have no rain. So there's a time of abundance of pastures. These are silvopastoral systems. Just as Carlos was saying in a meeting before, out of reality, these are not designed silvopastoral systems. These are cattle that graze natural or introduced pastures and that browse on a wide variety of trees and shrubs, natural. But in the dry season, there's nothing much to eat. And there's a balance between the contribution of the calf to the income of the farm. Now calves are very expensive, so people are milking less and giving more priority to selling weaned calves for fattening in Mexico. And so here again you have like a time of lush pasture in this beautiful setting and tropical areas, and then the dry season they may have some maize over and basically it's a bare ground, and it's when the browsing of the leaves of things like huizaches and other thorn bushes and tropical trees like these ones become very, very important. And now we go to small-scale dairy farming. Small-scale dairy farming takes place everywhere in the country. Even where the very large dairies are, you have small-scale farming, Many of them are workers of the large dairy farms that have a few cows. They milk their cows early in the morning, and then they rush to the big dairy, and they work driving tractors or feeding cattle or milking cows, and then come back in the evening and milk their little herds of cows. But they're usually concentrated in the central part and in the highlands, both into Oaxaca and Chiapas here, the highlands of Veracruz, the highlands, Los Altos de Jalisco, Guanajuato. So you have these little farms, small farms, relying on family labor. The man and the wife herds between 3 and 30 cows, many of them kept in confinement, linked very strongly to the maize crop, where the family, the children of the family, help with the chores, milking cows or feeding cows before going to school, when returning to school, from school, and women have a very important role. When there's irrigation, and the place where we work, where it's from, these pictures are taken from, the farmers go through cotton carry of these irrigated pastures. They spend a lot of work. They cut it by hand with scythes and carry it in barrows or in their pickup trucks, milking in little sheds. About 30% of farmers have these portable milking machines, but most farmers milk by hand. They sell milk locally in formal markets, and most of the milk is transformed into artisan-made traditional Mexican cheeses. Our team proposes grazing of these pastures as a way to reduce feeding costs, and our work has shown that farmers can reduce their feeding costs by 16 to 20% and save 4 hours of labor, which they can use for other activities. And what's the importance of small-scale dairy farms? Some people say, like, aren't they disappearing? Aren't you aiming the wrong segment of farming, working for small-scale dairy farmers rather than the large, modern, intensive farms that are the future? And I said, well, I don't work with minority farmers. I work with the majority of farmers, because over 78% of farms in the census of 2007 are small-scale dairy farmers with herds up to 30 cows. So the reality in dairy farming in Mexico is that the vast majority of dairy farmers are small-scale dairy farmers. You have anything above 30 for me is big, but well, you have medium-sized dairy farms, and those huge dairies of the pictures that I showed you before are just a few hundred dairy farms. So dairy farming in Mexico is comprised mainly by small-scale dairy farms that contribute importantly to milk production. Obviously, large-scale industrial farms of 200 cows or more do produce a lot of the Mexican milk, but small-scale dairy farms, which would be semi-specialized, I don't never known what do they mean by semi-specialized, in the sense of family farming, which again, what does family farming means, because there's a farm in some place in Jalisco that's called 19 brothers, well, 19 brothers and sisters. So everything is done by the family, and they have over 5,000 cows. So sometimes family farming is a name for small-scale farming. Better call it small-scale and let the family out. So Small-scale dairy farming produces between 30 and 37% of the milk in Mexico. Tropical dairying or dual-purpose dairying produces about 18% of the milk supply, and the rest is mostly produced by the large, intensive, modern industrial dairy farms. I would like to stop here and see if there are any questions, any interest that you might have that can lead the discussion into the second part of my presentation, which deals with the paper that I understand has been sent to you on the role of small-scale dairy farming in poverty alleviation. Our work, our team, as I mentioned before, is the participatory improvement of small-scale dairy systems as a rural development option.
So, questions, comments, reactions from what you saw, from what you heard? Anyone?
Yes.
What the percentages that you showed were from 2007. Do you anticipate any change in those numbers over the last almost 10 years now?
Almost 10 years. Difficult to say. There might be, in some places, what is happening is that the middle-sized farms, those like between 60 up to about 300 cows, are finding it difficult to survive. They don't have the capital resources of large dairies to withstand low milk prices, and they don't have the flexibility of small-scale dairy farming that can, if milk is not selling good, they will reduce their use of concentrates or do other things. So we might see less of these middle-sized farms disappearing and more of this last segment of herds of 600 cows or more increasing. Now there's a problem for big farms. They are usually found in the semi-deserts of the country. We produce milk where there's no water. So they're having to pump water from deep wells that are 600 meters down. So it's very expensive. Sometimes they are pumping out fossil water, sometimes with high arsenic contents. There every certain time there's a cows getting intoxicated with arsenic. There's a problem here in Chihuahua because they are drilling wells. The people from the large farms are buying land or buying forage from Mennonite communities in Chihuahua to ship it to this area of La Laguna, and that's having very important environmental problems. There's a river here in Chihuahua called Concha River, and it, for example, has one of the populations of wild Mexican trout, a little Mexican trout that's being threatened by all of the use of the pumping of the subsoil water into from the wells. So many believe that large-scale dairy farming is reaching its environmental ceiling, its economic ceiling. So some people project that we won't see many more large farms. Others say that there's still room for very large farms to grow. But what might happen is that the middle sector, the mid-scale farms will probably, this sector is the one that's going to be mostly stricken by economic situations, because the price of milk in real terms, once you take inflation, has been going down everywhere in the world, not just Mexico.
Has there been any effort by the government to explore different sources of irrigation in areas where groundwater is being used currently to, prevent depletion of groundwater sources?
Alternative sources of water there's some areas in Mexico that have large dams and irrigation projects. All the coast of Sonora and Sinaloa, where the Green Revolution took place in the 1960s, have all the watershed. This is the Sierra Madre, the large mountain range of the west. So all this area is rich in water resources, rivers that come down from the mountains. So there's a lot of irrigation schemes here, but around here is the dry area. So there's been efforts to technify irrigation rather than just flood irrigation. They've made lots of investment in sprinkler irrigation and micro sprinkler irrigation and underground. I don't know how you say that in English. I don't know if anybody, all these hoses that go underground with. It's like drip irrigation, but the drip. Sorry. Subsurface irrigation, difficult in forage production, very expensive. You need a very large investment on those. So it's not very common in forage production. It's in all of the fruit and vegetable export markets, these investments are taking place, and the government has several support schemes for farmers. Usually it's a 50% subsidy, between 25 and 75% depending on the area, and very poor farmers get 75% subsidy. Better well-off farmers get 25% subsidy in things like intensive irrigation schemes. Many of the farmers that we work with, the small-scale farmers, have been taking advantage of this program to have sprinkler irrigation, make a better use of limited water resources. Yes?
Hi, yes. Talking about the very large-scale farms.
Yes.
In the paper that we were reading, it mentioned NAFTA being implemented, and I'm wondering if that number of the larger scale farms rose or began when NAFTA was first being implemented, like what the correlation might be between there, because I imagine that those really large producing farms would benefit the most from that trade liberalization.
It's very interesting question that you bring, because unfortunately I don't have the graph that goes to the 1990s. There was a scare, and if you read the paper, there's the preoccupation. The NAFTA, we in Mexico thought that once the NAFTA moratorium in 2000 and 2014, 15 or 10 years after NAFTA, 20 years after NAFTA, we were going to be flooded by American milk and American dairy products. So there were schemes to support national milk production, and it's the slope of the growth from 1990 to 2000 is even larger than the 1.4. It's around 2.1. So it's a time where Mexican dairying grew a lot, grew very, very much, very, very strongly. So at the time when we thought that dairying was going to be at the weakest side of the equation, it's when it became very strong. And you have a growth in large dairy farms during the 1990s. It slowed down after 2000. A bit of what I'm saying, some people think that this type of dairy farms are reaching their limit, that there's not much where to grow, and it's happening in other areas of agriculture. And sorry, and the other issue I wanted to tell you. So what happened was that there was a growth of large-scale farming, and there was a growth of small-scale farming, and it's the tropical farming, the dual purpose, which stays stable. If you read statistics from the 1990s, tropical milk production contributed over 22-25% of the milk production in Mexico. And now, in fact, more recent figures talk about 16%, not only 18, but 16%. And when you look at the numbers, it's not that milk production in the tropics has gone down, but it has remained stable. So it's the other two sectors, the large-scale milk production and small-scale milk production, that have now a larger contribution of milk. So NAFTA did not affect milk production in Mexico. What has happened with the liberalization of the market is that we are increasing the imports of cheese. We're importing, some things that people call cheese, analog cheese, or very like industrialized Monterey Jack thing from several places. Uruguay, very, very low price cheese, and what would be called like elite or delicatessen cheese, or this European Roquefort and Manchego and all the high price end of cheese. And many industries now at one time only the Mexican government agency for these things was able to import skim powder milk. Now any company can import milk. So they are bringing in skim powder milk to include it in dairy produce, mostly like yogurts. And for the rehydration and making this milk formula, skim dry powder milk, vegetable fat and water, and sell a milk beverage at lower prices than cow's milk. Yes? Sorry, Michelle.
No, you basically answered the question I had. So, but are there other questions?
You talk about where there's so many farms that are underneath 10 cows. Do you see that, like Wisconsin has had the trend in the rest of the U.S. that those cows consolidating, or those are larger farms would not be feasible in those areas?
No, in this area, there's a very strong agrarian tradition in Mexico. There's a social tenure of land, and this was like government-owned, not government, state-owned land, where that families, the ejidatarios, could use, but they could not sell, they could not transfer at any time. And what happened in different parts of the country is that the original land endowment then was divided into the sons, then it was divided into the grandsons, then society moved and it was divided for the next generation of sons and daughters. So people have very small pieces of land, but they are very attached to the land. In 1992, the constitution was changed so that people could sell their land and consolidate their land and have bigger farms, and investment could come in and private capital could come in. And it didn't happen. It just happened in a few places where illegally these ejidatarios were already renting the land to large horticultural companies, and it just legalized something that had been happening for a long time. But the idea that the planners had, that by allowing people to get rid of the very small, unproductive pieces of land, they would be able to have larger farms, the new managers of the land in Mexico. something that has been happening is that if you go with our farmers and ask them how many cows do you have, they'll say 3. And you count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And you have 3 cows. Yes, I have 3 cows. There are 12 cows in your yard. And they would say, oh yes, but mine is 3. It's 2 from my father, 3 from my brother that works in the USA, and 1 from a brother-in-law that once went away to buy some cigarettes and hasn't come back in 30 years. And so you have, and that happens a lot in Los Altos de Jalisco, that you have like multiple family ownership with one member of the family managing a larger herd where they can bring the land together. But it's not happening like on a whole and a large scale happening. Yes? Right.
Carlos, before you do move on to the next section, there are a few words that you use that I would like you to clarify without going into much detail. And
Happiness?
there are three of them. One is you talk about informal markets, and you talk about silvopastoralism, and then the dual purpose. You can just clarify, just briefly, what those things are for everybody in the class.
Yes.
So silvopastoralism.
Silvopastoralism is where there's a forest component, a tree component on the system. So silvopastoralism, you would have grazing and trees or shrubs. Agro-silvopastoralism, you would have a crop as well integrated. But it's basically where there's a tree presence in the pastures. That's silvopastoralism. Intensified silvopastoralism is like planting higher growth, higher nutrient grasses, and lots of like legume trees like lucine, which is very nutritious and high in protein, and cattle consume it. But this is just would be like a natural silvopastoral system. Dual purpose is specialized dairy farming is when the calf is taken away from the mother shortly after calving and is raised by hand. Some people say raised artificially, although they drink milk or a milk replacer. They are taken away from the dam, and they the sales of offspring of calves does not represent more than 35% of the income of the farm. In these farms, the selling of the wean calves, that's a cow.
You had a good picture of the calf suckling. I think that's right there.
The sale of the calf has an important component in the income and in the management. So usually these cows are milked once a day because they have the zebu genes. They are not as docile as the specialized European dairy breeds like Holstein. So they need to have their calf near before milking so they can let down the milk and let the farmer get the milk out of the other milk the cows. And depending on the price of beef is the amount of milk. Cows are usually in the tropics milk just once a day. So the calves have after the morning milking with their dams to suckle milk. So the cow raises their calf, it's not separate. And then at night they separate the calves from the cows. So the milk that is synthesized in the afternoon and the night is milked in the morning. So yields of milk tend to be low, from 2 kilograms per day these cows from these pictures are yielding between 7 and 9 kilograms plus a calf. And when the price of beef is low, the contribution of milk and the reliance of the family on milk is very, very high. At this moment, the price of weaned calves is very high, so the contribution of milk to the family income is lower. Now it might be about 65% the sale of calves for beef and about 35% the sales of milk. There's a study, there's a paper, if anybody is interested, you can have it, where daily milk pays for the daily running of the farm and the daily livelihood of the family. And the selling, which is done once or twice a year of the calves, is like the big cash coming in from the crop of calves that allows family like to project for the next year. But the role of milk keeps the family going on an everyday basis. And the third,
Informal versus formal market.
informal versus all this milk in the small-scale dairy systems and tropical systems is sold to local vendors. It's usually sold warm, it's not cooled, and there's no hygiene standards that are enforced in this system. So it's raw, and cheese is made from this milk, from raw milk. It's usually not pasteurized. Some of it is pasteurized. If you have Oaxaca cheese, the milk has to be warm, so that's a slow pasteurization. But and it's for local markets. It's sold locally, and it's sold for local cheesemakers that make cheese and sell it locally. Although having many Mexican immigrants in the States, there's a cheese done by this with the milk from these cows in Zacazonapan that is exported informally to the United States. So I'm sure if you go to what's the street in Chicago that has a big Mexican market, you might find some of this tropical cheese where it's very, very famous, and it's from different parts of Mexico. There's one cheese, Cotija, from Michoacan, which is the oldest cheese on record in Mexican history. We didn't have cows in America till the Europeans came, so this is from the I think as early as 1530, 1528, there are records of that cheese. That cheese is matured. It's left to ripen once it's made, and it's like that because it was produced in the mountains of the Sierra Madre, so it couldn't be brought out during the rainy season, so it had to wait till the dry season after November, after December. So it has a ripening process of about three months of ripening. Ripening changes the pH of the acidity of the cheese, and that kills all pathogenic bacteria. So a ripened cheese, just like European cheese, is very safe to eat because it's all normal processes of lactic bacteria acidifying the cheese wipe out any pathogentic bacteria. The problem is in the other systems that you see some pictures, because this milk is used to produce fresh cheese that is not ripened. That can be a health problem, particularly for tourists. We don't worry much about that, but if you visit us, beware, you're being advised. Yes? One of the problems of this informal market is that these farmers get a good price for the milk is not regulated. And it hasn't increased because of the national, international formal markets that have very low prices. So our work is, the price of milk is not going to go up, or is not going to go up significantly. So the only way these farmers and their families can secure their livelihoods is if they bring the cost of production down, and they need large margins because production is small scale. So they need large margins per liter of milk to be able to survive.
So, I'm sorry, just to clarify, the price of the milk in the informal market is higher or lower?
Higher.
It's higher.
Higher. Well, in the large industry, they have pay schemes based on milk quality. So they get premiums for components, for protein, for fat, not yet lactose, and they get penalties if they have high cell counts. They get a lower price, and so in the formal market, there's been a lot of improvement in milk quality, as has happened everywhere in the world. So many large farmers do get good prices due to quality, and they are vertically integrated. The very large farmers are members of these large farming cooperatives like Lala, which is the largest agri-food consortium in the Americas. It bought 2 or 3 large American dairies, not farms, but the processing companies, and so it's very, very large. And Alpura, which is in the center of Mexico, have some schemes where they can pay higher prices to their partners, to their members, because they are registered as cooperatives. So the profit is shared in a price scheme. So they declare no profit, they don't pay tax, and the farmers get better prices. But in general, in the market, these farmers are getting like 42 cents per liter. It's warm milk with no health standards. There's no penalty for bacterial counts, for large cell counts. There's no premium for fat. Some of these cows produce very rich milk, but the price they fetch is the same whether it has 3.8% fat or 2.8, if it has 3.3 protein or 2.8 protein. Right? Yes? No more comments or questions? This is the work on the paper that was sent to you in terms of how the small-scale dairy farms work and how do they contribute to the livelihoods of farmers. Is the work of Angelica Espinosa Ortega, myself, and a team of other colleagues who authored the paper. It's a colleague researcher at ICAR, and as I was telling Alfonso this morning, she also happens to be my wife, but that's not her fault, that's all my fault. And so you've seen very contrasting dairy systems, so we cannot have across-the-board policies for the 3 systems. What works for one system might be useless for another system or don't work for another system. So they need, policies need to address the particular characteristics of these systems. The problem is that policies tend to be across the board. We'll support dairy through whatever scheme is promoted from government, from local or from federal government, and it usually is for all dairy farmers. And dairy farmers are very different in this free large system. As I mentioned, small-scale dairy farming provides between 30 and 35% of milk production in Mexico. So it does have an important stake. They do have an important role to play, and they represent over 78% of dairy farmers in Mexico. Dairy farming, as you could see, is I don't know if anybody has been involved in dairy farming. There are two things that dairy cows always produce, always generate: manure and a lot of work. Sometimes they also give milk, but they provide work day in, day out, no holidays, Sundays. So you have to love the cows to really work with dairy cows. But this allows families to have a decent livelihood in their communities. So they do have an important role in offering opportunities in the rural areas, reducing migration, which is one of the problems, not only of Mexico, not only in the relationship between Mexico and the US, but as we've seen lately, unfortunately, it's a world issue, migration. When the Constitution was amended, that I told you that they allowed the free sale of land by these agrarian communities, there was one worry of what's going to happen to all the campesinos that are going to sell their land. Where are they going to go? Our cities, our industrial sector was not growing at an enough rate to offer decent work opportunities for all these migrant people. So it was lucky that it didn't happen, although there's a lot of people leaving the rural areas, moving into cities within Mexico, and moving away from Mexico. All the people at the hotel we're staying are Mexicans, so I feel at home when I come to Madison. Tomorrow I've been promised I'm going to have some homemade salsa for my breakfast, and so it's an issue. And dairy farming, small-scale dairy farming, offers the possibility for members of the family to stay in their communities, and through hiring temporarily or permanent jobs, like some families hire a milkman on a permanent basis, they offer job opportunities in their communities. So the definition of small-scale dairy systems are small farms, little agricultural land. Milk sales are very important, are the first component of family income that might be complemented with other sources of income, both on-farm or off-farm activities. Herds between 3 and 30 cows plus replacement, linked traditionally to maize production in basically all over the country, and rely basically on family labor, but they can hire people, and are integrated mostly to informal markets. In some places, like in Los Altos de Jalisco, even very small dairy farmers have incorporated into formal markets. They sell to large dairy industries like Danone. Danone has, you say Danone in English? What's the pronunciation? Danone? The French? Danone? Danone. Or Nestle? Nestle, I think. Well, so they sell their milk, so they get contracts within this formal market. They have to meet quality requirements. They do get premiums and penalties for their milk. But in many other places, mostly informal markets, as I have described, many of them local cheese makers of traditional Mexican cheeses. So the objective was to identify the technical, economic, and social characteristics of small-scale dairy farms in the highlands of Mexico, and to contrast their economic performance in terms of income generation to Mexican poverty indicators. This is again Mexico. This in blue is the state of Mexico. Just where the red light is Mexico City. These are the traditional cheeses made. This is jocoque, which is like fermented milk, almost like yogurt, and cheese with chili, different types of fresh chilies or dried chilies, or without chili. The cord here is molido, ground before putting in little mounds. This is very traditional. Of course, the Oaxaca cheese we'll see, which is the stringy cooked paste. And within the state of Mexico, the work took place in this area. This area in the state of Mexico, not only the municipality of Aculco where I work, but the 6 municipalities here, is the 4th region with the largest milk production in the state of Mexico, so it's very important. So a sample of 67 farms that had between 3 and 20 cows, questionnaire and semi-structure interviews as the method for collecting information in terms of productive characteristics, the economic analysis through budget analysis, and some qualitative aspects that were concentrated in 12 variables. These were subject to a multivariate factor analysis that produced five factors. These 5 factors were analyzed through multivariate cluster analysis, and non-normally distributed variables were analyzed with Kroshko-Wallis test, things like herd size, land surface, and those that were normally distributed, like milk yields, were analyzed with analysis of variance. There was an economic analysis performed per cluster, and this was compared against the poverty indices at the time. These are the characteristics of the 3 groups. 3 clear groups were identified in the cluster analysis. The first group, which has the largest number of farms, are the very small farmers, called in the paper, if I recall well, subsistence farmers. A medium of 5 cows per herd plus replacement, 2 hectares of land, a total land per farm of 3 hectares. They are usually renting 1 hectare of land. And the other 2 groups, the one with 15 and the other one with 13 farms of the sample, which was about 5% of the total farm population in the region. So with 11 and 12 cows with no statistical difference among them, 5 and 4 hectares of land, total land surface 6 and 9. This third group rents in 5 hectares of land, so have the largest farm. This, just the same as these ones, rent 1 hectare of land, so they have double the land and a bit over double the herd size. Schooling performer, it's primary school in Mexico are 6 years, so only 1/5 of farmers in the group 1 have more than primary education, while group 2 has the highest schooling, with almost half the farmers with more than 6 years of school. And the third group is the less educated, with just 50% of the farmers with more than 6 years, more than primary education. All farms have other animals. There's not only dairy cows. Many keep the males to fatten them, and they have sheep, and they have some pigs, and they have rabbits, and they have chickens. and they play a role as another economic activity. A fourth of farmers in Group 1 have other animals that provided income to them. A third of those in Group 2, but more than half, 60% of those in Group 3 had other animal production activities within their farms. In terms of technical assistance, this is important. Group 1s and 3 basically did not have regular visits by technical assistants, whether government paid extension or private consultants, whilst the second group, half of them did have regular visit by professionals of technical assistance. In terms of the number of management practices identified, very few of these farmers in Group 1 did practice any. I think the limit was three practices, like separating the calves from the mother and raising them by hand, artificial insemination, while 70% of those in Group 2 had these technologies incorporated into the management, and just about a fourth of those in Group 2. Hiring external labor, Groups 1 and 2, very few of them hired. They relied mostly on family labor, both the very small ones and the largest of the farmers. While farmers in Group 2, 40% of them did hire in external labor. And this is very interesting. Government support schemes. How many farmers do have it? Basically, none of the smallest farmers participate in any of the government support schemes, while almost 90% of those in Group 2 do receive some, participate in some program of government support, and about 70% of those. So the larger farmers do get more government support, while the very small ones don't participate. And the origin of incomes, both farm and off-farm activities for Group 1 and 2. Group 3 basically get all their livelihoods from farm incomes. Forage, they all devote, feed their cows with what we term high quality forage. Milk is, milk production requires lots of milk concentrates. Here we see the role of commercial concentrates. So farmers use commercial concentrates, and how concentrates. And milk yields. There's the Group 1, the very small farmers have the lowest yields. Group 3, an intermediate yield, and Group 2, the highest yield with 5.5 metric tons of milk per year. These are small cows. These are cows of about 900 pounds. That I made the conversion for 150 kilograms. So our small cows compare with modern Holsteins that are, I think they're bred with, I was saying yesterday, with rhinoceros, because they're huge animals. And this is the important part. How much do farming bring into the family? It's $44 per month per family member in Group 1, 110 in Group 2, and 94 in Group 3. This means that farmers in Group 1 are below the $63, which at the time was set as the limit for extreme poverty. So if farmers were only to rely on income from milk sales, these farmers would be below poverty lines. There's three levels of poverty. One is food poverty. The other one was called capacity poverty, the possibility of having enough resources to do what people have to do. And the last is called patrimonial poverty. I know nobody knows what patrimonial is, although this is a word that does exist in the English language dictionary. So it's like assets. Poverty of facets means that what's needed for people to do all their daily livelihood and have money to pay a rent, to pay transportation, and other things. So farmers in Group 2, which are the best educated, which are the most technified, and that make the most of government support schemes, do get enough income. These are the main conclusion, and the important thing is that farmers, that even at this stage, this sector of small-scale farmers, they're different, they're heterogeneous. So again, we need policies not only that address the tropical, the large scale, or the small scale, but even within small-scale dairy farming, we need differential policies because they face different livelihood challenges and different poverty challenges. So there's some conclusions, and we should take the last few minutes for discussion. Sorry, I extended too much on this one. I don't know if
Questions?
Yes.
Is there any, since the research shows that perhaps a slightly larger operation or a better educated farmer means more money per family member, is there any move to are there farmer cooperatives or any sort of move to kind of consolidate cooperation between farms anyway?
Yes, there is a very strong government support scheme for extension trying to get farmers. Cooperative movements in Mexico has failed over the years. We're very individualistic. It usually, cooperatives are formed to make use of government support schemes. So everybody gets together, and when they get the money, the leader of the cooperative buys a tractor, puts it in his house, and the cooperative is dissolved. Now, with more education and better extension, they're trying to do like consolidated buys. Rather than buying each one of them a bag of concentrate every 3 days, they're buying a lorry load, a truckload of concentrate and divided. So there's a movement towards cooperation, and there's a movement towards cooperatives. We have links with a dairy farmers group, don't know if it's still a cooperative, and a cheesemakers cooperative, 14 cheesemakers that are getting together and trying to get a better product to be able to reach other markets. So that's moving. And there's a big drive towards education in Mexico. Now the big rumble, there was a very strong teachers union that kept the quality of education in Mexico despite all the investment at very low levels. This is being changed now. It's evaluation of teachers and everything. So we hope that in the future, and the future can be 20 years, the children are going to have a better education. And education, there's other work that has been done in Mexico that for every year of extra schooling, the income family gets, I can't remember the figure, but it's like $100 a year more of education. And you can see here, where's the schooling? The schooling of these farmers allows them to have better off farms work. Many of these farmers, I don't know where's the external labor, are able to pay and better pay external labor because they have work as mechanics or work as clerks or work as employees in some other work. So education is one of the clues because it allows them to demand technical assistance. They take advantage of government support schemes because they can read and write fluently. Many of them, although they can read and write, they are, there's a word like functionally illiterate. It takes, and they don't like having to fill in forms, and they don't like having to rely on a technical professional to fill in their forms, because how can I be sure that he's putting my needs? I might be asking money for 5 cows and he can write 10, and the rest of the money, he's going to give me the money for my 5 cows and he's going to get the money for the other 5 cows. And how can I know? So I don't trust, I don't participate in the program because of that functional illiteracy. There's a big problem that technical assistance forgets small farmers. Technical assistants are paid like on the number of cows they provide assistance to. So larger farmers are much more attractive to veterinarians or agronomists that provide technical assistance, because they get the government support, and if they have to have a 200 cows in attendance, it's better to work only with 10 farmers with 20 cows than to work with 20 farmers with 5 cows, 40 farmers with 5 cows each, and that has to change. So technical assistance schemes cannot be on a per cow basis, should be on a per farmer basis, and they should have technical assistance devoted to work with these farmers. These farmers are very small, so they would need aid in terms of government support. While the larger farmers of Group 3 have all the resources except the schooling, so the experience of these farmers in Group 2 could be transferred to farmers in Group 3, productive technological changes that might improve their systems and their income, and therefore their livelihoods. Although money is not happiness, it does help a lot. Any other comment or question? Yes, you have a question. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering. I shall. Do farmers have any means of participating in shaping the policies that affect them?
Theoretically, yes. There's a national law of sustainable rural development. It's a very interesting document, and that set local, county, rural development councils, where farmers, their representatives, meet with local government officials and establish the sort of programs they want to develop, and they want the government to help them. In some states, like in Veracruz, they are very successful. There's a very strong participation, and they do have a say in the programs they want. Now, it's usually they have a number of requests, and the program comes that we're going to support tractors, heifers, whatever, and that's it. So they adjust their requirements to those plans. So, for example, in the place where this work was taken, it is middle of the road. There is some participation. It's politically motivated, so many of the farmer leaders are looking for bettering their position in the political scene. They make very good use of government support, so it's like halfway between very successful, and in other places of the country, farmers don't even know these councils exist, and they by law should meet, I think, every 2 months or every 3 months they should, and they should give their conclusions to the regional rural development, sustainable rural development council for it to make the plan. So in theory, the bases are formed. Some are taking advantage and participating in that, but in most of the other places, it still hasn't trickled down, hasn't worked.
Okay.
Whew, just in time.
Really appreciate appreciate it.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Let's give Carlos a hand.
Thank you.
Thank